Welcome to Behave Yourself, the podcast that aims to bring the science of human behavior and how you can apply it to your own life and become the happiest, healthiest, and most successful version of you.
We're two behaviour analysts with backgrounds in personal training and nutrition who've struggled in the past with confidence, weight loss, breaking promises to ourselves, and constantly trying the quick fixes.
We bring the science and show you how to apply it confidently and consistently towards your own goals and how to actually create a lifestyle change.
Behaviour analysis is the science of human behaviour, and we all engage in behaviours that either move us towards the direction of our goals or hold us back from living the life we desire.
I'm one of your hosts, Emily McRae.
And I'm your other host, Jo Wesley. Hello.
Hello.
How you doing?
I'm well. How are you doing?
I'm doing really well, thank you.
How have you been behaving yourself this week?
I have been recording 2 podcast episodes with you in one day and forgot before we started recording to think of the second one. So I'm going to say the same as last time, which is I have still been making myself tick lists and doing really well. But I haven't got a second one. I'm really sorry.
It's funny. It's funny how we... It is interesting how we record so many of these in one go, and they're releasing multiple times throughout the weeks. And so as we're going through, that's kind of the reality of this is us. We're real.
Yeah.
And we're really, and it's not like we're changing up our goals week to week to week. So we really are working on behaving ourselves on the same things all the time and drinking more water and eating more veggies. I mean, you guys are going to be sick of hearing it, but I'll let you know when I'm not behaving myself with it. But my goal is to continue behaving myself with water and veggies.
I guess that's true. We're recording a few weeks ahead of schedule. So this week was both mine and Emily's birthday week. I think I had maybe 4 different types of chocolate on my birthday. So that wasn't, I think it was pretty well behaved. I enjoyed every second of it, but not as usual as drinking water and eating veggies kind of goals.
Right. I had a lot of donuts and it was delightful. So
of the box that you showed on Instagram, how many did you eat?
We split it. So I had 2.5 and Tom had 2.5.
Nice.
So
they looked good.
It was split in half. They were really, really good. Really good. Like big, cakey, good donuts. So worth it.
You'll be pleased to know that 2 of the types of chocolate I had were stuffed with peanut butter.
Ooh,
my favorite.
It's good chocolate.
Talking of the fact that we record in advance, on the last podcast, we said that when we get to 10 reviews on iTunes, we will do a lucky dip of the people that have left reviews for a half an hour Zoom session of your choice with either me or Emily or both of us. But please remember that we are recording a few weeks in advance. So if we've hit 10 and we haven't picked someone yet, it's just because we haven't announced them on the podcast yet. It's because we are from the past. But we will get to it, I promise, as soon as we hit 10. And we'll probably announce it on social media weeks before you hear it on the podcast. So that's why we might be delayed.
And we'll keep reinforcing those reviews. So don't worry, this won't be the only time we do this. And sometimes it'll just be me or just be Jo, but don't worry. We want to see all those reviews come in.
Yeah, for sure.
Yep. Perfect.
Okay. So today's podcast topic comes from a listener question that we had through our DMs. And the listener question goes, I don't have any control after food after I've drunk alcohol, and giving up alcohol just isn't an option for me. So what can I do? So I thought this would be a good one to dig into. I have all the things to say about it, partly because I totally relate, and I certainly come from history of feeling exactly the same way. But I think behavior analytically, we can have some input on this, and particularly coming into this time of year of Christmas, it's probably something that a lot of us are feeling elements of it, if not all of it.
For sure. And I'll kind of touch on the more behavior analytics side of it. I haven't firsthand dealt with it as much, but I know kind of those other antecedent or consequence strategies that we can use to implement.
So maybe let's go into that first, because I have some kind of mindset and value and goal and kind of ACT style thoughts about it, but maybe let's go into the basics first. So I think we mentioned on the last podcast about Christmas, whenever I know that I'm going into a party or a time of drinking, Christmas Day, whatever, Jim and I would call it, my husband and I would call it pre-gaming it, and not pre-gaming it in the way that we did at university, but be pre-gaming it with always having a pre-drinking meal of plenty of protein, some veggies or fruit, a minimum of maybe 300 to 500 calories minimum before we go to that party or before we start Christmas Day eating and drinking.
Mm-hmm.
Often I think we drink our alcoholic drinks quite quickly because we are hungry and we've gone with the expectation of having that delicious meal on Christmas Day or having the delicious meal at the restaurant. But because we're hungry, actually sugar from alcohol is really quickly processed and easily processed by our bodies. So our bodies love it. And so we'll often drink very quickly and then it will go to our head very quickly. And our inhibitions are lost slightly after a few drinks. So then we'll probably eat more and maybe make not such good choices after a drink or two. So I would always recommend pre-gaming it with protein, veggies, at least 300 to 500 calories, if not a few more.
Yeah. And I think too, pre-gaming with water. We talked about this too on the last episode, having a water with you at all times. It's kind of that age-old kind of thing of drink, then water, first water, then a drink, and then first another set of water, and then your next drink if you have it. But using kind of those first strategies, this question really piques my curiosity with not having control around food and booze and the environment that's set up around that. So is it when you're at home? Is it when you're at a party? Is it when you're out at a restaurant? Where is it that it's really starting to trigger this behavior? So is it when you go out and then you come home and it's that food at home? It's kind of those different levels of where is it that it's first occurring and triggering that behavior, because then we can set up that environment. So maybe at home, you don't buy any of those like sweets and treats or pizza or chips, whatever those things are, and they're not in your home. So when you come home from a party or a bar, you're not as likely. If you're drinking at home, still continuing to recognize what's in your cupboards, in your cabinets, and knowing you have just the options that you want to be eating in your cabinets.
And making sure that they are fun options as well. So we have things like salt and vinegar flavored rice cakes that are really tangy. And what we probably want to have in our drunken state is a big pile of fries or chips. But the salt and vinegar rice cakes are a tenth of the calories and less fat, but they'll do the job and they will hit they'll hit the same function as the chips or the fries would.
It's a really good replacement behavior.
I think so. Thanks. So yeah, definitely make sure that you're stocked up on all the food before you start drinking. I think often we binge eat because we've been restricting previously. So make sure you're not restricted previously. Set up your environment for success. Maybe try and plan for it. So if you can't control your environment because you're not at home, although why aren't you at home? You should be in lockdown.
Yes.
Never mind. But if you're out at a restaurant or you're at someone else's house where you know there's a lot of treat foods that you have no control over, maybe try and identify which foods you will allow yourself to have more of. And it might be the veggie platter, or it might be the meat or charcuterie board, rather than the stack of mince pies or cookies or whatever is your Christmas food.
Yeah, you don't have to, again, we're probably not looking at completely eliminating this behavior at first, but looking at decreasing it. So what is that food that you're typically binging on after drinking, and what that is, and how can we either decrease it or replace that food that you're eating to a better option, like Joe said, with the rice cakes.
Yeah. And then definitely, if you do want that particular food, don't restrict yourself, but have one of that type of food, one portion. So like one mince pie or one cookie or one handful of chips or crisps. And then make sure you have a delay between the next portion. So it might be that you put a timer on your phone. It might be that you go and talk to that uncle who you know occupies your time for 20 minutes, have a glass of water. And then if you want another, go back and have another. But I think we've talked about delay, distract, decide before. So have it, delay it, distract yourself with something else. And if you still want it, it's a holiday or it's a party, go back and have it. But what you'll probably find is that after you've had one and you give your body and your stomach and your brain a bit of a chance to catch up, your body will realize, oh, I've had enough, and I feel satisfied, and I don't feel restricted, and I am physically satiated from the calories. It's enough. I don't need to go ham for the rest of it.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. And I think too, looking at prior to this whole situation, why or when you're losing that control in the eating and drinking process, where is that kind of tipping point? And if there's maybe some reminder you can set in your phone, like, hey, future self, I know this is a struggle, set it for midnight if that's typically when this is happening, and kind of give yourself those visual written prompts and cues of, this was your goal you're trying to work on, remember XYZ, or write yourself a note on the fridge door for when you come home, and doing some kind of those antecedent strategies, but to your future self, because you're aware of this situation, you're reaching out to us, you're commenting on this, so you know that it's something that you're working on. So setting those, like, in that state of not out of control, reminding yourself what your goals are.
For sure. So then getting on to more of the kind of mindset goal type stuff, I tried to reframe it to myself. So I think most of the people that listen are either behavior analysts that have worked with children, or parents, or children in your life. But the person that sent us this question is obviously seeing the lack of control around food and booze a harmful behavior in some way or another. So let's try and reframe this, and imagine if you had a 5-year-old come to you and say, I have no control around biting others after playtime, but giving up playtime isn't an option for me. What would your reaction be? Oh, for goodness sake, like, no, like, you need, like, parent yourself. You cannot bite others. It's harmful. That's not an okay thing to do. You've decided for yourself that biting your friends isn't nice and isn't good and isn't acceptable. You've decided that eating 12 bags of cookies after drinking is also not acceptable. It's time to parent yourself. You would be shocked and horrified if a child said something similar. And I'm not saying I'm shocked and horrified by what you've said. I've certainly felt the same in the past. But let's get some perspective here.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a really good comparison to make. And you do a really good job of that, of kind of switching the perspective of looking at it from an adult to a child, because we're always so focused on children's behaviors, but then our behaviors are either okay or allowed because we're adults, and it's, well, I'm an adult, I can do whatever I want. But if a child were to bring up this statement, you would immediately take action and figure out, well, why is this not an option to give up?
Yeah. I often see memes along the same lines of, like, we expect our children to be this and that and the other, and yet we're so relaxed with ourselves. We need to give children more slack, and maybe we do, but also we need to parent ourselves a bit more.
For sure.
Going back to the statement as well, I wonder if there's a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy going on there, or if you've read Carol Dweck's book, a bit of a kind of stuck mindset of, I have no control around food. Well, and so it is, like, you've said it, and so it will be. Why don't you have control around food? Like, you can, like, if you have no control around food, I mean, there's a pathological name for that. What's it called when someone just can't stop eating?
I can't think of the name.
No, me neither. Never mind. Like, you do have control around food. You don't brush your teeth at 10 o'clock at night and then go back to the cupboards and start eating a 3-course dinner. You do have control around food, but you've given yourself that verbal statement of, I have no control around food. And then, so it is. And it would be really interesting then of, if you put up a thought experiment, or did a thought experiment of giving yourself, say, 3 glasses of wine and filled a room that you're locked in full of foods that you don't like, would you still have no control around food? Probably not. You'd probably be able to resist the food that was there. And so, are you setting yourself up for a self-fulfilling prophecy? Are you restricting yourself so much with foods that you really do like that when you lose slight control, you then have no control over them? Well, then we need to look at your management of foods that you really love in the day-to-day, and maybe you're being a bit too restricty. And yes, I think restricty is and should be a word. And reframing that verbal behavior you're having around food and booze?
Yeah. I think it's the story that you're telling yourself, and bringing up Carol Dweck's Mindset. Amazing, amazing book. I can't recommend it highly enough. But looking at that story that you are telling yourself, it's going to continue. I tell this with my clients. They're like, I'm not a morning person. Well, continue to tell yourself that, and you're not going to get up and work out in the morning. Like, that's just, it's this continuation, and you're just identifying as this person who doesn't have control, or who isn't a morning person, or who isn't somebody that works out. Like, that's just the story you're telling yourself. You can shift the narrative, and it's a little bit of talking yourself into it before it becomes who you are as a person. But saying I have control is starting to regain back control over food. You do have control. It's just there's certain variables in your environment that are leading to you determining that you do not have control currently, but you can regain it.
Yeah, agreed. And maybe diffusing your kind of current thoughts about it of, oh, well, I've had one drink, I might as well go in on it now. Diffusing those thoughts in some way, because that's not, if this is what your goals are, to not drink those things, you know your values, you can pick different behaviors instead.
Right.
Please know that with everything we're saying now, it could come across as really judgy. I have come from a background of, as I said in the Christmas episode, a very boozy family. We will start drinking champagne at probably 8 a.m. on Christmas morning. We will not stop drinking throughout that day. And I really enjoy a glass of wine or a gin and tonic. But I've also had years of using alcohol for other reasons, not in a particularly worrying or dangerous way, but using it maybe as a way to numb or a way to not face difficult thoughts. And so I sometimes, and I probably do this once every 6 months or so, sit down and write out alcohol is ... And it might be what your favorite drink is, like margaritas are, or red wine is, or gin and tonics are ... And then all the things that they are for you. So for me, like a gin and tonic is delicious. It's sociable. It's one of mine and Jim's shared enjoyments. It is alcohol. It's calories. It's refreshing. It's all of these things, and like explore what it might be. And it might be that for you, alcohol is a comfort. Gin and tonics are a way of distracting myself. Alcohol or gin and tonics are a coping mechanism when I'm around that person that makes me feel this way. And then really try and explore the more difficult ones, and the ones that you look at and go, oh, I don't like that I'm feeling that way. I'm not saying that using alcohol as a coping mechanism is bad per se, but you can teach yourself other ways of coping with these thoughts and feelings that maybe are more healthy.
Mm-hmm.
I realize I'm treading on shaky ground here, because I certainly have used wine as a coping mechanism in the past.
Oh, and I think we all have. And you see, and a lot of these memes have come up this year, and just in general, people's statements of using alcohol to cope with COVID and quarantine. And so much of that was so present. And it's not something that I consciously made that decision to not use that as an excuse. And my husband doesn't drink. He hasn't drank for several years. And so it's not something that we do often, or that I do often. I've had a few more, like recently, just because of my birthday and stuff, had a few more glasses, but consciously not doing the I need a glass of wine because I've had a bad day, or this terrible situation happened, I need a glass of wine, and using that as a coping mechanism. It's not the end of the world, but at the same time, if it becomes this repeated way of dealing with a really challenging situation, looking at that and saying, is that how you're coping? Is there another alternative to that? Now I have a glass of wine because I enjoy it, because it pairs well with a meal, because it tastes delicious and it's refreshing and it's cozy on a birthday night. But it's not because of XYZ situations. And I'm still very conscious of that, because as my husband says, I'm very susceptible to social norms, and it's a very social normy thing to have a drink because X is crazy right now. And it's something that is a very big challenge, and it's very prevalent, I think, throughout this whole COVID situation for many, many people.
And it becomes almost a social narrative, doesn't it? People will say, oh,
Mhm.
well, don't worry, it's almost gin and tonic o'clock. And it
Yes.
becomes a thing that we hear as a social norm. So therefore we think must be acceptable. But to get personal, I think probably exacerbated by lockdown. One of mine and Jim's best friends is currently in rehab. He's going to be there a while. And another person that's very close to me and my family was an alcoholic for the whole of their lives and struggled with it, battled it, won against it, then had a diagnosis of cancer and fell back into it. And eventually it wasn't the cancer that killed them, it was the alcoholism. So this is, as much as we're trying to give ideas around control around food and other things, if this is a serious problem and you notice that for yourself, and maybe this podcast has triggered certain ideas for you, there is help to be had in lots of different areas. And I can't give one that would be worldwide. I'm guessing Alcoholics Anonymous is the only worldwide one, but Google that and find help. Go to your GP or your, what do you call your doctors? Your family
PCP,
doctor?
PCP, primary care physician.
Go to your PCP person and seek help there. But I think the person that sent this question is just maybe enjoying the chips a bit too much after a glass of wine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's definitely one of those things that if this has brought up something for you, reach out to somebody that you care about or
For
that you
sure.
that cares about you.
Yeah. Something that Jim and I do at least once a year, we'll do dry January. And not because it's a thing and not because it's a social norm, it just happens to be a perfect break. All of my family's birthdays are in November and December, and then we have Christmas. So November and December tend to be fairly boozy, and so we'll have the whole month of January with no alcohol, and often kind of then forget to have a drink until mid-February, end of February anyway. But I think having a few weeks off booze at least once or twice a year is a really good thing for reframing your relationship with alcohol and reframing what your body can tolerate and what you the way that you appreciate it. So after having a few weeks off alcohol, I can't tolerate quite so much. And so one glass of wine is more than enough, as opposed to at Christmas time, I can drink an entire bottle of wine and it won't touch the sides. I'm not proud of that, but it's true.
Yeah.
I also then really appreciate one glass of wine and it will last me the whole evening and I'll really enjoy it. Whereas, as I was saying, at Christmas, we'll start with champagne and I won't really even, I will appreciate it, but I won't be aware of like, oh, I should be really enjoying every sip of this. And I think if the idea of having a month of alcohol worries you, scares you, or you just think, I just couldn't do it, maybe dig into that of why you couldn't do it or what would the barriers be there. Because I think it's a really healthy thing to do.
Yeah. And you can start with, if it's you have something every single day, decreasing it by like 1 day a week, you just don't have anything, or just decreasing the volume of it. There's different ways to go about it where you don't have to just stop altogether for the month at first, if that seems very unachievable for you.
Yeah, it's something that certainly Jim found really hard at first. So we found lots of really good alternatives. So good replacement behaviors. So like
Yes.
alcohol-free beer, alcohol-free gin. There's loads of different options out there now. And my parents have hopped on board and they get really excited about, I think they have, I think you guys call sparkling apple juice cider, but in the UK cider is alcoholic. So you can get
We
alcohol.
have both. We
Okay.
have alcoholic cider and then sparkling cider that's non-alcoholic. Yeah. And there's a lot of non-alcoholic drinks coming about. I've noticed. I get them because I'm part of like the triathlon stuff on Facebook, but I get the athletic brewing ads on Facebook a lot, and it's just a non-alcoholic beer. It's got a pretty can. I can't drink beer, but I could probably drink that. So
Right.
yeah.
Top tip though, if you ever want to get sucked into the trend that's kombucha and you don't want to spend an entire mortgage, just get some sparkling water, tip vinegar in, and like you're set, because it tastes equally disgusting. So don't waste your money.
Now we know Joe's perspective.
I know. I went to a fancy cafe once. I was like, oh, like I'll treat myself to kombucha, and it was like £7 for a tiny bottle. I was totally bricked.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, I think that's all we have time for.
Yeah.
Perfect. As usual, if you want to hear any more from us, Emily's Instagram is at emily.a.mccrae and my Instagram is at the Behaviour Lady, and still from the UK, still spelt with a U. So behaviour is still spelt with a U. And our podcast Instagram is at Behave Yourself. If you've got any comments or questions or anything you want to connect with us, you could also email us at behaveyourselfpod@gmail.com.
Perfect. And we would love it. We continue to say this over and over again, but we would love it if you guys would leave us a review on any platform that you're listening on. If you want to and you don't know how, we've got the task analysis. You can look at that or reach out to us and we can help you with that as well. But it helps us get more listens out to more people. And that's really what is going to make the difference for us. We want to reach as many people as possible. So share it, send it out to people that you care about, and we appreciate it.
For sure. As always, it's my job to give the disclaimer. So we're both behaviour analysts and qualified in our respective fields. This podcast is for education and information sharing only and shouldn't be taken as personal, medical, or behavioural advice or services.
Perfect.
Super.
Alrighty.
We will see you next week for a chat about New Year's resolutions.
Yes, I'm looking forward to it.
Perfect. See you next time.
Bye.